If we enable people to make payments online without privacy, and we make that the default, then we're creating the prison that we will then live in.
Josh,
Yeah.
thanks for being here. Welcome to the, we're going to call it the Flexus Show for now.
All right.
You know, I'm glad we got to meet before. I've been reading a lot about you online. You spent 25 years outside of crypto, just about. I might
Is
have
that
my
how
numbers.
many? I have no idea.
You haven't counted?
A lot. You counted. I haven't counted.
So you have a whole wealth of experience outside of the space. You're building in now the privacy space. Can you tell me a little bit about the history of your career, of how you ended up getting to crypto?
Oh gosh. So actually, when I started playing with computers when I was really young, and so Dad brought home a compact luggable, and it was like a desktop machine that you could carry around. So it had a handle on it and two little disk drives and this tiny little screen. And I fell in love. And then, by the time I was in high school, I was running bulletin board systems. So it's like precursor to the internet where you can dial up. We had so many modems, and you can dial into the modem.
I think you just said a bunch of words that like someone under the age of 25 might never have heard.
Yeah, it'd have multiple phone lines, and then and each phone line connected to its own modem, and you would dial in, and you could set it so that it would like re-ring, because it'd be busy, people would be on, and then what we would do is like share cracked video games. So you have a video game, and they usually have some kind of copy protection, and then we would crack them so that it would erase the copy protection, and then like for every megabyte that you upload, you can download like 10 you can download like 10 megabytes. So you had all these games that you had access to. The idea was like pretty, it wasn't just, for most of us, like it wasn't actually a steal. It was just like, there's so much crap. So it's like, as a kid, I don't have that much money.
Right.
So I want to download a game. I'm going to try it. If I like the game, I'll go buy the game. But if I don't like the game, then I can just try something else. So I was able to, because you'd go like to buy a video game, it's like $50 or $60 or something like that. So just a lot of money. And then it's like, this game sucks. And you didn't have the internet to like search for like what was good or what was bad. You just had these bulletin boards, and we'd had chat and messaging. So I got into computers then, and was learning to program through high school, and then have been in computers ever since, building software. So it started in telecom as I was a C++ developer, and then a lot of consulting, built a lot of apps, a lot of software over time, just outside of crypto, and then fell down the crypto rabbit hole later.
When was it? When was your entry into crypto?
It wasn't until 2016. So I'd heard a lot about it. I was busy doing my own stuff. I knew about Bitcoin. I didn't think it would work. I was familiar with Zcash before, and it didn't work. It was still fairly kind of centralized. And so I started playing with Bitcoin, and then I started playing with Ethereum and smart contracts. And it was during that time that I was trying to send some money to a friend overseas, got blocked. I was like, crypto should solve this. And then I decided this is what I was going to do for the rest of my career, was working on solving that.
What did your friend say when he didn't get the money?
He didn't actually get the money. I had to go through traditional, because the crypto stuff, like he was unbanked. So my friend is a community leader in the slums of India. Grew up in a slum called Calabria. And then has been working on like English medium schools and providing services for people in the slums. And so there was a fire in one of the slums, and so he sent me a note, and he asked if I could send over some money to help buy some blankets and food. And so I went to Western Union. I tried to send via Western Union. They blocked the transaction. I went into a branch because I was like, why am I getting blocked from sending my friend money. Again, my friend was unbanked, so that was the only way to get him money. And they said we don't know, but I was on some list somehow, or he was on some list somehow and got blocked. So, and then he had to find a friend who had a bank account. I had to spend a half a day in Wells Fargo doing multiple hops 3 days later. So now you've got 3 days that have passed, hours and hours of time just to get a little bit of money to get somebody food who has no food and has no, and it was like, we need to solve this. We had crypto, it should have been in there in seconds to minutes, at the time. And so we just need to fix this broken system where we have these intermediaries that just can arbitrarily just shut us out.
How did you come to understand that crypto might be a solution for this?
Well, I was working on crypto, so I understood it would be a solution because I was playing with Bitcoin, I was playing with Ethereum, and really just those two. And it's like, if I could get him a wallet, like he didn't have any, he had a mobile phone, but like kind of no notion of what crypto was.
Right.
And so I didn't know what was possible for him in terms of onboarding and offboarding. And also recognize that it potentially puts him at danger. Like if I send some Bitcoin to him, and he finds somebody that's going to exchange that Bitcoin, like it puts him in physical harm if kind of his balance isn't private and the transaction's not private. And I didn't know why. I had been either shut down or he had been shut down. Yet no notion of what reason, but understanding that Bitcoin is completely transparent. So it just was, we needed to find a solution that had privacy.
So this moment led to almost two realizations, right? The payment processing industry is not good. The second was that crypto is a halfway solution, but there's not enough privacy. Is this where the privacy moment kind of struck you the strongest?
Yeah, it was a mix. I mean, that was the trigger point. I was looking at, I thought Ethereum was really interesting from building this kind of world computer or programmable money. And that's why I was playing with smart contracts and some different kind of ideas on my own. And then this happened. And then it's like, well, how can we do this? Actually, can we do this safely for people that are just not crypto nerds, which is predominantly what, the industry was? Can we onboard normal people, normies, and have it be safe, easy, and secure without somebody in the middle blocking these transactions? And again, like, won't even tell me why they're blocking access. So yeah, it was a realization then that we need a full up kind of payments solution to allow us to really do peer-to-peer payments without an intermediary and without somebody having the ability to spy and then either cause harm or block transactions.
So you joined the ECC, what was ECC, in 2018?
Yeah, so it was 2000. That was 2016, and so I went looking for a solution. It's like, what else is happening out in crypto that would work? And I found Monero, and I wasn't a fan of Monero or the community. And then I found Dash, and Dash, really kind of welcoming community, really nice. And I went to it, but I was like wondering about the technology, the tech behind it. They had rebranded it. Dash used to have been Darkcoin. Part of their story had been privacy, but they were shifting away from that whole thing. And I went to a Dash meetup in Denver, here in Denver, and was talking to people about kind of how it worked and what was going on underneath. And somebody said, who you got to talk to? There's a new project being spun up called Zcash. It hasn't launched yet, but the founder is here in Colorado. And so then I got engaged with the Zcash community in 2016 before launch, and then eventually joined full time as an employee in 2018.
What was it, that 2-year gap? What was like the journey to get to that place? Was it convincing your significant other that this is the job for me, or what was that?
Well, so I at that point I had quit my job. So like I was the CEO of another company, and that company, we had pivoted into software for the ski industry. ironically, my history with that company is what opened my eyes to privacy and the issue with payments, having non-private payments. But in that company, then we had hired another executive who came from the ski industry. I felt like I could step out. I wanted to focus on crypto full time. So that's what I did. I focused on it myself. And then it wasn't quite 2 years, because it was like end of 2016 when Zcash launched. And then again, just kind of watching, not even thinking that I wanted to work on the project full time, or that I even necessarily wanted to like go work for somebody, but just kind of playing with it. And then at one point, a job opening came up. They posted a job opening for a chief marketing officer, and I said, okay, I'll apply for it. And because I was just getting more and more obsessed. And then they put me through a whole gauntlet of tests. Like, they made me video myself talking about why Zcash was important. They made me do competitive analysis. So they gave me that task on like a Thursday or Friday and said I needed to have it turned in by Monday. And they kept giving it. And so I'd do a task, and then be like a couple months, and they'd reach back out and they'd give me another task. And I was getting really frustrated. I was like, who are these people? You're yanking me around. Like, I've been an executive for a long time, and they're making me jump through these hoops. Do they really know what they're doing? Are they really serious people? And they had given me one last task, and I said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. But eventually I did, and because we had become such an obsession, and just had to humble myself, and one thing led to another, and
You ended up being the CEO.
yeah, after some years. So I joined in 2018, and actually had to take a lower title, took a marketing director title, and my salary was like lower than it had been in like 15 to 20 years. But it didn't matter. Like, it was about the cause, and this was the best solution to solve it. And I wanted to work with the team. And so pretty quickly, then I had like eventually everything that was extra, anything that was not engineering, pretty much. So, government or policy, regulatory relations, PR, marketing, comms, all of that I had responsibility for. And then I actually left the company in 2023 to be able to speak more openly about issues that I saw with the community, or with things that were happening within the community and the ecosystem. And then a few months later, I came back as the CEO.
Wow.
Yeah.
Couldn't leave, huh? So we'll get more into like what you're working on now, but I want to dig more into why privacy, why Zcash, and why is privacy so important to crypto. I think it was definitely a bigger narrative over the last year. You had mentioned to me before there was kind of this quiet lull period. So let's dig into like, why do you so strongly believe that privacy is needed in crypto?
It's funny, like, people think about Zcash in terms of it being a privacy coin. Being a privacy coin, like, that's, for me, that's not the goal. And it's not about necessarily even just privacy in crypto. It's just about people's agency, their ability to make their own decisions, their sovereignty. And for me, it's like, so I did work in the past where we started aggregating data from all these different data sources well before crypto, and using that data to try to get people to do things. So it's like traditional advertising, right? Is you put together marketing messages or advertising, you put it in front of somebody, you see if it works. If it doesn't work, you put something else, and the tools are getting more and more sophisticated. So we had built systems in my career where we started aggregating data off the internet. So keep in mind, like, this is a relatively like new thing where all of a sudden people are posting all their things for everybody to see. Because before the internet, right, you would have a camera and you would see a beautiful photo, a landscape, or you'd want to take a picture of your family, or you're on vacation and you're taking pictures of a beach or sunset, and you either take it to a photo developer, or it started to be digitized and you could like put it on a CD-ROM or something like that, but it doesn't go anywhere. Like, who sees it? Your family sees it. Your unfortunate friends who come over and you want to show them your vacation photos see it, but not everybody sees it. So all of a sudden we have this platform where everybody can push all of this information out for everybody to see for all time. It never gets deleted. And we're just giving more and more information, and the sites that are out there are providing these platforms for free because they can monetize that information. So now we have this new place where we can share, which is amazing, but we don't even think about the implications of the sharing. So before this, had built systems where we're looking at, where it started was actually an intel system for a government, where they were flying over satellites and drones and things like that and taking pictures of things that are happening over the ground. And you're taking a picture, you're taking a photo. I'm taking a photo of an airbase. I know what airplanes are on the ground. I can do edge detection on the photo to determine what kind of airplane it is. And then I can look at the changes of that over time to determine what this kind of other country might be doing in terms of
I see that quite often on X now.
On the airbase. So this was happening, this system we were building in around 2000, right? So about 26 years ago. So my architect on that system and I, when we started working commercially, is like, we could use actually the same tools and technologies for commerce. So people are now posting their photos online. We can determine what is in the photo. We can use edge detection. We have all the metadata around the photo. When was it taken? Where was it taken? Right? Now we can start to aggregate that with other information, your Facebook information, LinkedIn information, stuff like that. So I know that's you that took that photo. I know where it was taken, when it was taken. I know that you don't actually live at that location, so you're probably traveling. I can determine who else was in that photo with you. I can get their information. And so I can start to build up these very rich kind of profiles on people and what they're doing, just based on what they're choosing to disclose online to everybody. So we had this internal tool called Creepy Crawler, and that was kind of the light bulb moment for me, was like, this is very actually pretty scary that we're putting all of this information out there, and that people are mining all of this information. And a lot of it started with marketing, where it's a challenge response kind of thing, where I give you a marketing message, like when you're viewing it, where do your eyeballs go? Do you continue to scroll down? Do you stop on the scroll? Do you click on the ad? If that doesn't work, then I give you something else, and I give you something else, and this change of data over time. And I get more and more information about who you are, what you like, what your interests are, and I can start to manipulate you based upon how I see you act and engage with this content. So you take this, and we shut that program down, and we pivoted to the ski software stuff. Because it got way, way too creepy. But we knew, like, if we are doing this, then others are doing this, and likely governments are doing this. And this was all pre-Cambridge Analytica. But then when I got into crypto and I saw that all this data is being posted online about people's financial transactions, and I can not only monitor those payment flows from those people, but I can associate it with their whole social profile online, everything else that they're doing online. And it just adds to the richness. It's like, we can't have this. Actually, if we're going to build a Web3, if we're going to build a better internet where people can own their own data, so they can't be manipulated this way, they can't be surveilled this way, then we have to have payments that are private.
It's a lot to take in. Definitely, obviously heard of it. My mom, all of a sudden, is an avid online shopper. So she never used to do that when I was.
Yeah. Our behaviors change.
Yes, it's crazy. How does Zcash help solve this problem?
Yeah, so Zcash allows for private payments, private storage, and private payments without disclosing any information about the sender, the receiver, or the amount that's being sent. So with Bitcoin, if I send you a Bitcoin, then you can see the address that it came from. You can see how much money I have in that wallet. You can see the other transactions in and out of that wallet. You can start to tag that data so that I can start to build up kind of that whole graph. So there's a recognition, even by Satoshi, that if we could figure out how to apply zero-knowledge cryptography to Bitcoin, we would have a better Bitcoin. And so some scientists started working on that. Zero-knowledge cryptography had been discovered, 30-some years ago at MIT, and it allows you to disclose that something is true without revealing any of the kind of underlying details. And so some scientists worked on how to apply that cryptography to Bitcoin. And so they did, and that became something called ZeroCoin, which then became Zcash. And so it has the same, it's diverged in a lot of different ways, but it has the same underlying technology, tech as Bitcoin, but it allows for private peer-to-peer storage, payments and storage.
So you said earlier, Zcash is sometimes known as a privacy coin. Some people outside of crypto might feel that it has some kind of illicit meaning behind it. How would you argue that it is, on the contrary, something illicit? We've had this conversation with Bitcoin 1,000 times, right? But how about for privacy coins?
Privacy isn't like necessary for commerce. So like we went through with this with the rest of the internet, and now here we are again. We went through the privacy wars. Privacy wars, essentially the NSA wanted to ban people's use of encryption. And there were different standards, right? Like if you had, again, like way back in ancient times, if you were going to export software from the US to another country, you had to use different encryption that the government had the ability to crack. And so
you had to give them like a backdoor, basically.
It was just a different level of encryption. Okay. So it's like, I think it was, you could export 32-bit encryption or something like that, but you do 64-bit or something, then it becomes too difficult, and computers don't have enough compute to be able to do it. So they had these kind of different rules for how encryption could be used, but they did not want it on the internet. So anything that you were doing on the internet could be tracked and traced at that time, because everybody's traffic was just completely open. And what we realized was actually you can't do commerce with everybody's information being passed around. Credit card get information, balances. It's actually not safe. People's information gets stolen. Somebody created a tool, it was like a Firefox plugin called Firesheep, which allowed you to actually sniff a network. So you could go into a coffee shop and you could pull up your browser with the plugin, and you could see everybody's traffic that was going on. And that became this light bulb moment for everybody, is that actually, if we're gonna have like the Amazon.coms of the world, we have to actually mandate encryption. So now the government that was fighting encryption on the internet now mandates it on all government sites, and we have something called HTTPS, and all the browsers will give you a warning if it's not. So we're in this early days of crypto, where everybody's doing everything transparently, just like in the early days of the web, without realizing necessarily the implications of not having all that information encrypted. And there is coming a time, and I think we're now shifting into that time, where people recognize that it's not actually possible to use crypto the way it was intended without having encryption. So will bad people use it? Yes, bad people use email, and they use, I think I heard somebody else mention, was like, do you like, somebody's driving a BMW and then somebody uses it for a bank robbery? Do you blame the car
BMW?
Company for making a fast car?
They're driving machines.
They're driving machines, right? So of course not. But I think it gets colored. It has been colored. I think largely by governments and others who do not want to see it used pervasively, because they enjoy the ability to be able to track and trace. The problem is, in the conversations that I've had with various agencies in the U.S. is that there has been a recognition that it's actually a national security problem. So it's a personal security problem if I know how much you have, you're walking down the street, and I know how much is sitting in your wallet. That's a personal security problem. It's a business security problem if you're transacting and all of your customers are kind of engaging with you with crypto on payments, and your competitor can see it, all of your customers' engagements. That's a business security problem. But beyond that, if you have a nation that is all using kind of crypto payments and they're doing this pervasively, yes, you can see it, but so can foreign adversaries. So can hackers. So can people that want to manipulate your constituency, the people that you serve. So we actually need privacy for personal security, business security, and national security. And it's actually an imperative if crypto is going to be used for payments at all.
So jumping into the payments discussion, we talk a lot about just getting there, getting adoption. But you're essentially saying without privacy, it shouldn't happen this way.
Without privacy, crypto doesn't work.
How do you explain that to somebody who's outside of crypto? I think your story about the surveillance technology people have built is very probably concerning to people, but maybe a lot of us have put it in the back of our heads. But how would you explain this very shortly to someone who has no clue about what's going on, and say they're actually interested in crypto payments, but why do they need to consider that privacy is important here?
Yeah, just know that you're making a crypto payment today. That data is being kept, and it's stored, and everybody can see it, and it can never be erased. And it can be associated with everything else you ever have done and everything else that you will do, right? So it's a lot of mental load. It's the cognitive load of like, I'm going to purchase this thing or make the choice to actually spend. So what happens if you decide like, you're going to buy a bike from me? You know, I posted something on Craigslist. You come and buy a bike. I accept crypto. You buy the bike. What you don't know is I'm a criminal, right? And you go out and you spend somewhere else or something like this, and I get in trouble. So what happens when law enforcement goes to catch that guy? They look at who he's transacted with, right? He's transacted with you, right? So now you're part of this whole kind of net. And that's what they talk about with crypto. It's important that it be fungible, like a dollar. You know, if you buy the bike with a $100 bill, you exchange it to me, but there's like really there's no digital connection that ever lived before, right? So in the past, like not a big deal. We have this fungible currency. $100 bill is the same effectively as another $100 bill. But now we've created this linkage between you and me forever that you will never get away from at all, right? We're forever linked in that transaction. And so we've already seen with Bitcoin where if Bitcoin had been used, like let's say somebody had used it to buy something on a illicit site, and they've taken it and they've given it to somebody else, and that person has given it to somebody else for pure reasons, but there was a bad guy way down here, and that person tries to deposit an exchange, they reject it because it's tainted money because it had been used for something bad over here. So it's imperative that we have this kind of fungibility with the currencies that we're using online. I think people are starting to see that a little bit more. Like a lot of people start to see, the light bulb moment goes off when it's like situations like mine where I actually need something, and then I don't have it, and it's like, holy crap! Like we have to solve this problem. But I think more and more people are beginning to understand when they see the overreach, like what we saw with the Canadian truckers in Bitcoin. It could be frozen. It can be surveilled. It can be taken away. They know who the people are. They know who the wallets are. They actually shut down your ability to transact with the one.
It's almost like you found an escape hatch, but someone's got like a key on the outside of the hatch. Because you think, we have conversations with other payment teams. It's part of the solution, but maybe that some of them are missing the privacy piece.
If we enable people to make payments online without privacy, and we make that the default, then we're creating the prison that we will then live in.
I wanted to talk about, I want to get to why you're building payments, but something came to mind when you were discussing this last story of CBDCs. A lot of governments are trying to push them. I don't know exactly how far they've gotten, but it's been a big topic over the last, I would say, year. With what you're working on, like how does the industry, people like yourself, push up against that happening?
Yeah, there's different people that are pushing, like with CBDCs, they are a massive problem because they are effectively backdoored. There and have been various efforts to add privacy to CBDCs, and then make it difficult for somebody to, like, they have to get a court order or something like that in order to get access. But the reality is if there's a backdoor, there's a backdoor, which just means everybody's going to find it. So you implement something with a backdoor today, and you think, okay, I'm the good guy, and therefore, everything's safe. But everything's cyclical, and the next person then is going to be the bad guy, right? Into the seat that is able to kind of see all of this transaction. So what it does is it creates an illusion of privacy. Even if you encrypt the CBDC, you think, okay, I'm private, except for the government good guys. But the next election, now you believe it's the government bad guys that are sitting in that seat. And if it's something that can be discovered as a backdoor, it will be discovered. So what happens in North Korea finds that backdoor, which they will. There has not been a single system that I'm aware of that hasn't been hacked where there's been a backdoor. So now what you've said is you give an illusion of privacy. Everybody's using it safe, 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 safe. North Korea cracks it, then they're in. And they're in for all of this database that you can't take that database away. It never goes away. It's decentralized. So you can't just take that down and shift. They've got all of that transaction history.
So why did you decide, was it you that decided to push some of the main objectives of ECC, now ZODL, towards payments?
It was a mix. So there's like this, how do I answer this question succinctly? So basically, for the longest time, Zcash was kind of sitting on its own island. It was its own L1, its own layer 1. There wasn't a lot of interoperability. People had tried to create wallets to be able to use it. They weren't very good. And so it was very difficult. Like, you had to really want to store and use it. It wasn't for normies. It wasn't for normal people. And so there had been this kind of long debate as there has been with Bitcoin, is it a store of value or is it a medium of exchange? I don't actually care. Those are very symbiotic kinds of things. I need to be able to store my money. I need to be able to spend my money. And I want to be able to spend it how I want to spend it with anybody, not just with other people that are just like me in this very small tribe, right? So this very small tribe of Zcashers, I want to send somebody Zcash. That's great, but it's very, very difficult to grow that, where you get a merchant down the street to say, okay, now I'm in just on the Zcash thing when I don't even understand crypto and there's all these thousands of coins, right? So we had to make it super easy to use, fast and performant, better than Venmo, easier to use than Venmo, and we needed it to kind of be able to move off of the island. So we needed broad interoperability. So we talked about building a financial system outside of the traditional financial system, but adjacent to it, so that I could do everything I want to be able to do, payments, swaps into other coins, things like that, independent of any large bank or institution. But I could still integrate and leverage that large banking institution if I wanted to onboard or offboard, because you can try to create this separate little utopia over here, but people need some of those bridges. So that's what we focused on building and building up the stack, and saying, okay, we're going to build our own wallet, because most of the other wallets just suck. The user experience is really bad. They're not Zcash focused. They're not necessarily even privacy focused. So we're going to build something that is easy to use, performant, and be very, very opinionated about the user experience in order to kind of drive that out. So we started that in earnest in the beginning of 2024, and then shipping Zashi a few months later. And then the other thing that we kind of learned, there was this another project in the ecosystem called Project Jure, and it was run by. She doesn't like me to use her name publicly, but
okay.
Peacemonger is what she goes by, and she's now our head of marketing. But she did a ton of user research with the Zcashers that were out there, like why are you still here? What's really important to you? And what came up over and over and over again was, I don't want to just store my Zcash. I want to be able to spend it. I want to be able to use it. I want to be able to buy things privately from the Zcash that I'm storing. And that was like the number one use case that people wanted to be able to experience with their ZEC. So we said, we have to make this, like, the wallet that we create isn't just about storing your ZEC. It's about the coins want to move. It's about making it super, super easy to be able to make purchases with, everyday merchants, as well as, friends and family or other people I want to do business with.
So how did you guys get to the place of being able to use Zashi, ZODL for everyday purchases? What were the tools you guys had to build and integrate?
Yeah, so initially we named the wallet Zashi, which was short for Satoshi, which is the smallest unit of Zcash. And recently we've rebranded to ZODL just within the last week. So those two terms, if we're talking through them kind of interchangeably, what we started with Zashi, and one of the first projects we want to integrate with was Flexa, and making it easy for people to, buy Chipotle, which has become like, or Baskin Robbins, or Ulta Beauty, or some of these different places, because people wanted to be able to spend. And had known the Flexa team for a long time, really appreciated their perspectives on privacy, digging into how this was actually going to work. Does it actually keep users private, kind of through this whole thing? So we went forward with that. And I had met the Flexa, I had met Trevor and Tyler like years and years before, I think when they first announced Flexa, and which may have been, I don't know if that was 18 or 19 in New York at Consensus. And there was always just this kind of very, very strong alignment around protecting people's privacy and information, and keeping that secure, but allowing for people to be able to spend at the merchants they normally spend with.
Right. What are some of the new things coming to ZODL? The new wallet name, not just the name, but what are some of the things that we can look forward to?
Yeah, some of it. So what we're going to do with it is there's a use case that's kind of broadening. So there's a lot of people that want to be able to store their wealth in a wallet that they're not necessarily carrying around in their pocket on a phone. So we need to we need to look at desktop products. There's some additional kind of key capabilities as it relates to like time locking funds. So if I send funds out, I can say it's time locked for 7 days before it gets released. So there's a security measure, things like multi-sig, multi-account, and things like that. More sophisticated capability. There's people working on some like governance and voting, so coin holders can be polled as part of a governance mechanism. Underneath the covers, there's something called Project Tachyon, and then there's another scaling project. So right now, it's still based upon a lot of the legacy kind of Bitcoin proof of work style transactions. So in order to be able to scale to billions of users, it needs to be very, very fast. It needs to sync very fast. And so a lot of that work underneath the covers. So we want to make sure, like when people are using it, that there's like just no friction. It feels just as good or better as using Venmo without the Venmo in the middle, and has that. There's things we want to explore as it relates to like collateralization of the assets, so you never actually have to send your your ZEC, you can send another token based upon your holdings. There's some fun ideas to play with there. But in the very short term, we'll see calling multi-account in there. We have some hardware support, but people want to have accounts associated with the same key for some different reasons. And yeah, so those are some of the things we'll do. We'll have some integration with Ledger and some other hardware wallets and stuff like that.
So ZODL is effectively a tool for commerce, a tool for paying people, paying merchants, not only holding your assets, of course. Why the payments industry is ripe for disruption? Why do you think that you guys are building a tool that can disrupt the payment industry?
Yeah. So I'll answer that question, and I'll back up just on one thing. So yes, ZODL is the one you have in your wallet, is your everyday spending wallet. And then we'll create the vault for your own kind of personal bank account.
Okay.
Right? So you, you use a bank today, I'm assuming you do, many people use, there's many people that are unbanked or underbanked, but you have a set of services that you want, right? I want to know that I put my money in there, it's secure, like it can't be easily robbed, things like that. I'm not using that necessarily every day to day. I might use a credit card that the bank issues me or a debit card to be able to go make purchases. But the ZODL that is in your phone is your everyday spending wallet, where you're walking down the street and go buy your cup of coffee. And then the vault product, which is more the sophisticated thing, is the bank account that you get to host yourself. So we do have this system today that excludes billions of people, where you don't have a right to a bank account. Even in this country, in the US, you don't have a constitutional right to a bank account. And banks are businesses, fundamentally, right? And so, and then they get to choose what you're doing with your money. Even when you deposit the money in there, they don't have the money in there, right? They lend it out in order to make money on what they're lending out. They can reject you, they can shut you down. We've seen the debanking that's happened in crypto. We saw choke point 1.0, which was other things that the government didn't like, that people, it was like the adult industry and firearms and things like that. They cut people's accounts off, banks did. I had this issue where the bank that I started using when I was in high school, so a long freaking time ago, I tried to refi my house. They found out what industry I'm in, and they refused to refi my house. So I had to go to a different bank to get a mortgage, and I've been with them with my mortgages, everything, perfect credit record for decades. So they could make a decision to cut me off because they didn't like that I worked in the crypto industry.
Even if you made the money, had the history?
Doesn't matter. It's an industry they didn't like. It was part of like a government attack on crypto. But just like any particular cause or anything you're involved in, like my issue when I was trying to send money overseas to my friend, there's an institution in the middle, and somebody in that institution who's faceless and nameless and you don't have any interaction with can tick a box and say, nope, not allowed. So we need a financial system that allows people to be sovereign, where I can be my own bank, and then I can spend and transact the way that I want to spend and transact. We need an alternative to the system that is actually getting built up worse and worse and worse. It's bigger and bigger and bigger, the system that is sucking people in and trapping people in. In India, they actually made it easy for everybody now to get a bank account.
Oh, really?
Super, super easy. It used to be that there were so many unbanked, but it's a trap. Because all of the transactions is run by the government.
Oh.
And all of the transactions can be seen by the government.
So it's almost like the whole CBDC thing.
It's like a CBDC. It's just actually in a database, not a public database. It's in their database. So we need, in order to have sovereignty as people, to be able to have access to systems. I mean, you imagine a world where the things that you believe in are suddenly marginalized and cut off. So the way you cut somebody off, right? You cut somebody off, they don't have the ability to transact or engage monetarily. They have no cash system. You're reliant on a digital system. You're relying on a digital system that somebody else controls, either a corporation or a government. You've got to fall in line, or you're going to be out on the street and you're going to starve. You're not going to have access to anything. And so will your family. So we need this alternative system for people to be able to use and to go to, countering that other kind of system. Balaji put out a tweet, I think a couple days ago, and he said it's communism or Zcash.
Hmm.
And that's part of what he's talking about, right? It's this complete surveillance and control, or freedom.
We're headed this direction, it seems, with almost everything else, right? in the U.S. at least. But how do we get people to understand? Now, something I actually found really interesting that's happened during the Super Bowl was that Ring camera commercial that came out, and they were like, "Oh, we can basically find your dogs for you," right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know how true this is, but the backlash was strong enough to where they canceled the partnership with Flock, the company that built the AI software to enable this. How do we get people to realize this story you're telling, that you could just be like Kanye West? They could debank you, and now that guy can't perform in the United States.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he's got a lot of bills to pay.
Yeah.
But obviously, for someone who's just living month to month, it's a way different story. You literally might not make it to next month.
You might not even know why you've been debanked, right? So when I try to send funds via Western Union and they shut me down, they would not tell me why I couldn't send the money. So they can just do it. It may be that you bought that bike for me for $100 and I was the criminal, and so that's, you have a shady association, or maybe there's enough of those shady associations because you're using Craigslist all the time. There's lots of, I don't know, who knows, and they decide you're too much of a risk.
How do we get people? How do you think we start getting more people to understand this narrative of how important it is? Because I think there have been times where we've moved in the right direction. We've lost a lot of our will with social media, but what is the story you think we need to tell? How do we get? It seems like such a massive undertaking. That's why I'm like skipping around. But what is your take on that?
I don't know what the magic words are that turns on that light bulb in people's brains. If I did, I would have used them a long time ago.
Scare the shit out of them,
but we do have to make the tooling has to be at least as good or better than what the tradition, which is really hard because they have a lot of funding because they make a lot of money mining data. So so the tools have to be as good or better, just completely seamless. You know, it's just like whether you're using ZODL with Flexa at a register, it's got to work just as easy or better. It's got to feel very good, kind of through that process where like I actually know, like I feel better as a merchant. I might feel better that I'm actually not paying the credit card fees and have to deal with chargebacks and things like that they have to deal with. So there's a financial incentive. Maybe I'm getting something cheaper, but I know like if I'm paying, I know the credit card company is not getting all that kind of information. Maybe it's the capability is just as good, it's just as convenient, it's just as beneficial. But I know in this case I'm not selling it to myself to somebody else. And in some cases, I think it's people will there'll be like there has to be like a personal realization where I've experienced something. It was like where it really started to get real for me was using this tool called Creepy Crawler in my prior business that the architect built. And he's like, let me show you something. And I could put in my name and it told me where I lived. It told me who my kids were.
2000?
That was some years after 2000. But that's when we first met and built that first system. And then it took some years to build this subsequent thing. But so that was probably, I don't know, maybe over 10 years ago. But so like some of that stuff where you start to see and feel the impact. Like I tell you, like when people got debanked with this last Operation Checkpoint 2.0 in crypto, it got real for a lot of people really fast. And I think as those situations get, you know, like when people see the Chinese credit system, right, with a digital yuan, and they can see that you are getting logged in the system and everything you do, if you jaywalk, if you
Social credit score.
yes, social, if you steal a piece of gum or something like that, it affects your score and it's going to affect you forever. And now this is what we're willingly putting out there, all the time. So let's say you're a teenager and you're like smoking cigarettes or smoking dope or doing whatever, and during that time, and then you move sometime in the future into your career, and this is not something that's but that that is now unacceptable kind of behavior. That's forever. Those kinds of things are forever linked to you. I think as we get further down this, like we had that fire sheet moment with the internet, and people are like, "Holy crap, we actually can't do commerce online because credit card numbers are going to get stolen, people's data is going to get stolen. We need encryption." As soon as crypto actually starts being used for real things, for payments, and not just a speculative asset, an ETF, people's eyes will open.
Sounds like a problem that's not being talked about enough, if you were to ask me. This last year, what do you think it was that sparked that rise in privacy coin trend, right? I mentioned this to you. You had this prediction that Zec would reach the top 10 in 3 years from a conversation in 2022 to 2025. Almost did. But it just goes to show that the narrative became real. And like you mentioned, guys like Balaji who care a lot about sovereignty and freedom to the point of, they're building their entire lives around companies for other people, right?
Yeah, I think in over this last year, I think a lot of things have shifted. One thing that has shifted is the kind of the geopolitics, the politics within the U.S., the increasing divisiveness, the wanting the ability to speak, people having fear about the outcomes, even going past to prior years with debanking, the Canadian truckers, Operation Choke Point 2.0, shutting people out of banks. People's eyes are starting to open and saying maybe this is actually a problem. But historically, it's been too difficult to use. So when we introduced Zashi, suddenly it's very easy to use to store your Zec. And when we do that, there's a thing within Zcash. You can have transparent transactions, which are just like Bitcoin, or you can have shielded transactions, which is like Bitcoin plus this zero-knowledge encryption. There's something called the shielded pool, which is the total number of Zcash that has been made private, that's encrypted. In order to do that, you can't have it on an exchange like a Coinbase or Gemini or a Binance or a Kraken. They store all of their Zcash transparent. So in order to make it shielded, you have to actually have a wallet that you can download to, where you're then sovereign away from the big exchanges, and then you can shield it and have it private. So for the longest time, the shielded pool, because the user experience wasn't very good, and there's like no places to buy anything with Zcash, that shielded pool stayed fairly flat. When people would buy and sell Zcash, they would do it on Coinbase or Kraken or Gemini, but they would do it more speculatively. When we released Zashi, we saw now ZODL, we saw the increase, the shielded pool started to increase at a pretty good clip, kind of going into early 2025. We added hardware support so that people could do long-term cold storage, and we saw that shielded pool exponentially grow. And then we added swaps and payments, and we saw it actually go vertical in terms of the adoption. So people were moving it off exchanges, creating their own sovereign bank with the hardware wallet, with cold storage, and then actually using it to make payments to other people and to other vendors. And with that movement up on the shielded pool, that correlated with a massive increase in price. And then you started to have some key opinion leaders in the kind of community start to talk about it.
Hayes, Mert,
Naval, other people.
Naval was like the first one. It was like, okay,
Yeah.
if this guy's talking about it, maybe we should buy it too.
Naval said that if Bitcoin's a hedge against the US dollar and Zcash is a hedge against Bitcoin. And that he posted that in, I think, October, right at the end of October of last year, right as the price was starting to increase. and it just followed on. And a lot of other people across the industry were like, okay, all this stuff's been happening with Bitcoin. It's in ETFs. It's in people's 401k. This is not what I signed up for. I signed up for private kind of peer-to-peer payments and to be able to use this as sovereign money. Zcash is the project that has held true to those original values, and privacy. We're gonna need to have privacy if we're actually gonna use it for this stuff. And so more and more people started talking about it, and I think that led to the resurgence of the kind of the privacy coin narrative.
This might be a little bit step out of bounds of this conversation, but this has popped up in the last month of FUD against Bitcoin, the quantum stuff. And I'm asking this personally as well. Does Zcash, the ZEC, does that system defend against quantum resistance?
Yeah, so the goal is to get to post-quantum. In order to do like post-quantum cryptography right now, it gets very heavy, so it's very difficult to do kind of decentralized at scale. So Bitcoin is really ossified. As far as I know, there's no real plan to get Bitcoin post-quantum, because basically what you have is you have a Bitcoin address and you have a quantum computer that is just able to like brute force that address until it finds the key, and then it is able to access the funds. So that powerful of computer hasn't existed before. So with Zcash, because you choose if your address is revealed. So today, there's two parts to the story, or maybe three parts. But today is if your address is revealed, it's still exposed the same way Bitcoin is, right? You've got an address, and that computer can cycle through and try to brute force and get it. It's not necessarily a privacy thing or a privacy thing in the same way, but it is a attack surface on being able to access your funds. If you never share your address, kind of publicly, or it's like just with your counterparty, then it greatly reduces the difficulty. Like if a computer can't see your address, they can't attack it, right? So like we rotate the addresses within Zashi. You're giving out a new address every time, and so the ability to kind of get funds is more difficult. There's a project underway, like Project Tachyon, that may get us to the ultimate solution for post-quantum. Sean Bowe wrote a great paper on quantum computing and Zcash that outlines kind of where it is today and where it will go in the future. But there is a clear path to get to post-quantum.
There is.
Yep.
Zcash is the defense against Bitcoin? You said?
The hedge against Bitcoin.
The hedge. Yeah. So there's so many different. I imagine the conversation going a little bit differently, but learning so much myself about the surveillance aspect. I mean, I feel like it's probably one of the most important things that people actually, I feel, understand now. Palantir is mainstream media, and we obviously have the situations like with ICE, and everyone's starting to know like how they actually like target these people. Why do you think that crypto just isn't really in that conversation yet, when privacy in crypto is so mainstream? Why do you think it hasn't reached that point yet of people actually discussing outside of the core, what do we call ourselves? Are we nerds or something?
Crypto nerds. Yeah. I don't know. Like, there's a lot of folks that, the crypto is just, they think there's a brand perception with crypto broadly that like Bitcoin hasn't worked for payments. Nobody really uses it. It's now just a BlackRock owned speculative asset. Michael Saylor bought up all the coins. Like, nobody's using it for payments. Lightning doesn't really work. And there's been so much like bad associated with it. The frauds, the things that people have used it for that are, not good, to like, kind of scammy projects, scammy coins, things like that. So there's like and then you have the kind of crypto bro reputation of
Yeah.
many of it, and so like it just is a turnoff for a lot of people. And so I don't think we have, as an industry, like done a great job of communicating well what the power of this is and the importance of this is, and people like that narrative shift have to happen, and I think there will be some, and like you said before, like Bitcoin has this tainted reputation. Anytime there's like conversations around criminal activity, they're getting paid in Bitcoin and stuff like that. You have TV shows and they're like passing around little thumb drives with the Bitcoin, to do shady stuff. And so
it's like a trope now.
It is, yeah, it totally is. And I do think that it has been fueled by narratives that actually have come out of like places like Washington D.C. Like I had conversations a long time ago with some folks at DOJ, and they're using the same thing. They're like, well, this stuff is used for all kinds of like child porn, terrorist financing, all this money laundering. Like, how can you support all these things by adding privacy? The reality is that most of crypto is not used for any of those things. It's used for normal things, but they take those one things in order to try to and paint the whole canvas that way, and it's just false and untrue, in order to try to shape a narrative and get the outcomes they want. But we do. The more we can communicate the use cases and the value. Now we have like social media shifting. There's more places for people to have voices. One thing that I love about this project, one thing I love about Zcash, is that it's apolitical in terms of left or right. You had mentioned ICE, right? That tends to be, the anti-ICE tends to be kind of one side of a political spectrum. But ICE protesters and that kind of thing, and them being able to protect their privacy, and people being able to protect their privacy when they're at risk and their families are at risk, super, super important. The billionaires that are moving out of California because of the billionaire tax, and the companies that are moving out of California tend to be one side of the political spectrum. Yeah. Also have needs to be able to protect their wealth. Like Zcash, the technology doesn't care, right? It recognizes that people have different causes, they have different things that they believe in, different ideologies, but we all need the same thing. We all need privacy in order to be able to be truly who we are. Because if we're able to be monitored by these kind of powers, then it affects how we behave. If you know that somebody can see your full transaction history, they can see your family's transaction history, and somebody in your family is at risk, it changes your behavior and how you can engage, where you're going to spend that money, what are they going to buy or not going to buy, who's going to buy for them, because, and ultimately, that kind of homogenizes people, it dehumanizes people when they're kind of under the watchful eye of Sauron, right? Who can see and then can control the populace.
My last question to you. You have said before, essentially, if we don't deliver, we run out of options. What do you mean by running out of options?
We as humanity are screwed. If we don't succeed, we're screwed. Full stop.
I hope you succeed.
As communism or Zcash, regardless of what you think about communism as the ideology, we will have complete, the state and the powers that run the state will have complete control over all humanity if we're not successful.
I think that's an important message for people to hear. It's a somber note to end on, but I think the thing I took away from this conversation that I didn't expect is I see all this stuff every day, happening on social media, whether people are complaining about it, they don't even know this is happening, or they're directly talking about it. The conversation is much bigger than just crypto itself, but obviously you guys are building something key to solve the problem or make sure that it doesn't become a bigger one.
Yeah, we need the option for self-sovereignty.
ZODL.
ZODL.
Thanks, Josh.
All right.